You ever work somewhere that makes you question if basic human decency still exists? That was my café job. On paper it sounded harmless. Espresso shots, croissants, background jazz, customers tapping on laptops like extras in a commercial. But behind the counter, it was different. Every shift felt like walking a tightrope while my boss, Martin, stood below with a smirk, waiting for me to slip. Martin owned the café like a king ruled a tiny kingdom. He wasn't loud or violent, not in the obvious way, but his cruelty was sharp, quiet, the kind that slides under your skin and festers. He wore tailored shirts with the sleeves rolled up, a Rolex he made sure everyone noticed, and he had this way of calling you by name like it was an insult. "Liam," he'd say, dragging out the vowels. "Try pouring that latte again. Unless you like serving swamp water." I'd been there for 6 months. Long enough to know the café's rhythms, long enough to know who Martin liked to target, and long enough to realize no matter how hard I worked, I was always the butt of his little performance. The worst part wasn't even the insults. It was the waste. Every night when we closed, racks of unsold pastries, bagels, muffins, food that smelled like heaven and was still perfectly fine, went straight into the trash. Customers sometimes asked what we did with leftovers, their eyes lighting up at the thought of discounted goodies. I used to answer with a smile, "Oh, we donate them," until Martin corrected me in front of everyone. "No, Liam," he said, loud enough that a whole line turned to look. "We throw them away. We don't serve day-old garbage here. Only fresh." Got it? The way he said garbage made my stomach twist. Those pastries weren't garbage. They were breakfast for a single mom trying to stretch her paycheck. They were lunch for the guy I saw outside the bus station every morning, holding a cardboard sign. But Martin didn't care. He wanted the illusion of perfection. Day-old bread didn't fit his brand. One night, after a long closing shift, I stacked 3 trays of blueberry muffins, cinnamon rolls, and danishes onto the counter. They glistened under the overhead lights, still warm from the case heaters. My coworker, Jenna, stared at them with the same mix of awe and guilt I felt every night. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "Half the neighborhood could eat off this." I nodded, lowering my voice. "We could bag some, leave it by the door. No one would know." Before I could finish, Martin appeared like he'd been summoned by the thought itself. He leaned on the counter, eyes cold. "You planning to run a charity out of my café, Liam?" I froze. "No, I." He raised a hand, silencing me. "Throw it away. Every crumb. I don't care if God himself is starving outside. My food doesn't leave this store unless someone pays for it. Understand?" The room went heavy. Jenna bit her lip and turned away, pretending to scrub the espresso machine. I stared at the trays, then at Martin's smug face. My throat tightened, but I forced out, "Yes, sir." Martin smirked, satisfied. "Good. You'll last longer here if you learn to follow directions without the moral speeches." I picked up the first tray, my chest burning. The trash bin yawned open beside me. One by one, I slid the golden pastries into the black plastic bag, the smell of sugar and butter mixing with the sour stench of coffee grounds. It felt wrong, like I was burying something alive. Martin clapped me on the shoulder before walking off to his office. "Good boy, Liam. Learn to obey. That's what makes a good worker." That was the first time the idea sparked in my head. If Martin wanted food in the trash so badly, maybe one day I'd give him exactly what he asked for. The thing about working under someone like Martin is you start to measure your days in small humiliations. Each morning, I'd clock in, tie on the apron, and brace myself. His insults were routine, almost rehearsed. "Smile more, Liam. You look like you're brewing a tragedy, not coffee. Or, try not to look like you hate your life when you hand out change, it scares the customers. I laughed it off most days, but inside, every word dug a little trench. And every night, when I tossed tray after tray of untouched food into the bin, those trenches filled with resentment. The staff had our own silent rebellion. Jenna sometimes forgot to toss a bagel or two, sneaking them into her tote before leaving. Kyle, the night baker, once slipped a loaf of bread to a woman waiting by the dumpster. I'd carried muffins home in my backpack a couple of times, heart racing the whole walk. None of us were thieves, but it felt criminal to waste so much while people went hungry. Martin, of course, caught on. He had cameras installed, not for security, but for surveillance. One morning, he stormed into the break room, holding a flash drive like it was evidence from a crime scene. "Do I employ baristas or freeloaders?" he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The footage showed Jenna pocketing bagels, clear as day. She sat pale, trembling. I just didn't want them to go to waste," she stammered. Martin leaned close, his voice low but venomous. "This is a business, not a soup kitchen. If you can't tell the difference, you can find the door." He didn't fire her, not officially. Instead, he cut her hours until she quit on her own. That was Martin's style. He didn't swing the axe, he made you sharpen it yourself. After Jenna left, the rest of us became even more cautious. The guilt of throwing away good food grew heavier, but so did the fear of being caught. I remember one night, I stood with a tray of chocolate croissants, hands trembling over the trash. A man pressed his face against the café's glass door from outside, eyes locked on the pastries. He didn't say a word, just stood there in the cold, watching me throw them away. I almost opened the door. Almost. But then Martin's voice echoed in my head. "Obey, Liam. That's what makes a good worker." I tossed the last croissant into the bag. The man outside shook his head slowly, like he pitied me, then walked off into the dark. That image haunted me for weeks. The breaking point came during a busy Saturday morning. The café was packed, and Martin loved playing ringmaster when the crowd was big. A woman with her 2 kids asked me if we sold day-olds at a discount. I smiled politely, ready to explain, but Martin swooped in before I could finish. "We don't sell trash here," he announced, loud enough for the whole line to hear. "If my staff ever offers you yesterday's garbage, please let me know so I can correct their mistake." He winked at me, as if we shared some private joke. Laughter rippled through the line. My face burned, but I didn't say a word. I just kept working, hands moving faster, heart hammering. That night, Martin repeated his favorite command. "Throw it all away, Liam. Every last crumb." But as I dumped another bag into the bin, something inside me shifted. His words echoed in my head, louder than usual, taking on a different meaning. "Throw it all away. Not just the muffins. Not just the bagels. All of it. The shelves. The fridge. The stockroom." If he wanted waste, I'd give him waste. And for the first time in months, I smiled. The idea started as a whisper, something I didn't dare say out loud. But once it was there, it grew like ivy, wrapping tighter around my thoughts every shift. What if, just once, I didn't limit myself to the trays at closing? What if I followed Martin's order to the letter, throw it all away, and gave him a taste of his own cruelty? I couldn't shake the thought. Every time Martin sneered at me, every time I dumped food into the trash while someone hungry walked by outside, that whisper grew louder. By the end of the week, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a plan. I started noticing details I hadn't paid attention to before. The key to the back storage closet was always left on a hook by the sink. The walk-in fridge door didn't lock properly unless you slammed it twice. And the trash bins out back, huge industrial ones, could hold more than just a night's leftovers. Still, I wasn't reckless. I knew Martin thrived on control, and if I messed up, he'd chew me up and spit me out like he had Jenna. I needed timing, precision, and, most importantly, witnesses. Because what good was a lesson in waste if no one saw him choke on it? My opportunity came faster than I expected. Martin announced we'd be hosting a community night at the cafe, a PR stunt, basically. Free live music, half-priced drinks, families invited. The place would be full of customers, and Martin loved performing when he had a crowd. The night before the event, I stayed late cleaning, pretending not to notice Martin scrolling through his phone in the office, bragging to someone about how even Starbucks can't touch my brand. I waited until he left, then walked into the storage closet. I stared at the shelves stacked with flour, sugar, syrups, boxes of tea, crates of bottled water. Throw it all away. The phrase pulsed through me like a drumbeat. I didn't act that night, but I knew what I would do the next. The morning of the event, Kyle, the baker, pulled me aside. He was older, quiet, the kind of guy who let his bread speak for him. He'd seen me brooding, and apparently, my poker face wasn't as strong as I thought. "You planning something?" he asked, wiping flour from his hands. I hesitated. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged. "You've got that look. The same one Jenna had before she quit." I almost denied it, but then I thought, maybe it wouldn't hurt to have someone in on it. So I leaned in, lowered my voice. "Martin keeps telling us to throw everything away, right?" Kyle nodded slowly. "Well, maybe it's time we do exactly that. All of it. Tonight." His brow furrowed, but then his lips curved into the faintest smile. That'd ruin him. I shrugged, forcing nonchalance even as adrenaline buzzed through me. "He asked for it." Kyle chuckled, shaking his head. "Careful, Liam. You're playing with fire." Maybe I was. But the thought of Martin's face when he realized I'd taken him literally, that image alone fueled me more than fear ever could. That night, when the cafe filled with laughter, clinking mugs, and the strum of a guitar, I was already counting down the hours. I wasn't just planning to throw away muffins anymore. I was planning to throw away his empire. Community night was Martin's idea of showing off. He dressed sharper than usual, in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to flash his Rolex. He shook hands, kissed babies, laughed too loudly at his own jokes. The man strutted around the cafe like he was hosting a gala at the Ritz. Meanwhile, the rest of us worked double speed, balancing trays of drinks and wiping down tables. The place was packed, a line curling out the door. Music hummed from the corner, fairy lights flickered overhead, and for once the cafe actually felt warm, until Martin opened his mouth. "Liam," he called across the counter. "Try not to spill anything this time. The customers don't pay for a floor show." A couple of people chuckled. My ears burned. But instead of snapping back, I smiled. Because tonight wasn't about the insults. Tonight, I was going to take him at his word. The plan was simple. I'd start with the pastries. While Martin basked in attention, I would quietly dump tray after tray into the industrial bins outside. No discounts. No donations. Just exactly what he ordered, everything thrown away. First, it was easy. I carried out a tray of unsold bagels under the pretense of making space for fresh ones. No one questioned me. I slid them into the dumpster, the thud echoing like a drumbeat. One down. Many more to go. The rush continued, and Martin was too busy showing off to notice. He gathered a group of customers near the counter, spinning one of his favorite speeches. "You see," he said, voice rising above the music, "this cafe isn't like the others. We don't cut corners. We don't serve garbage. Fresh every morning, waste every night, that's the price of quality." Waste every night. The hypocrisy stung, but it also fueled me. While he bragged, I slipped into the walk-in fridge. Cold air wrapped around me, and shelves of milk, cream, juice, and sandwiches loomed like a treasure hoard. I grabbed 2 crates of bottled water and carried them out, stacking them by the dumpster. Not trash yet, but soon. I repeated the process, tray by tray, crate by crate. Muffins, croissants, tea boxes. All of it. Every time I stepped outside, the cool night air sharpened my focus. Every slam of the dumpster lid was another nail in Martin's coffin. But then something unexpected happened. Kyle, the baker, joined me. He appeared in the alley, carrying a bag of rolls. His eyes met mine, and without a word, he tossed the bag into the bin. "You're not doing this alone," he said. For a second, I almost told him to stop. This was my rebellion, my risk. But then I saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire I felt every night throwing away good food, and I knew he understood. Together, we worked faster. By the time the band finished their second set, half the storage room was already gone. Inside, Martin was in his element, oblivious. He raised his glass and toasted the crowd. To running a business the right way. I almost laughed out loud. Because by the end of the night, he wouldn't have a business left to brag about. The first cracks in Martin's perfect night showed up around 9:30. A customer ordered a chai latte. Easy enough, except when I reached for the syrup pump, the bottle was gone. Not empty. Gone. "Liam!" Martin barked from across the counter. "What are you doing, standing around? Move." I muttered something about needing to check the stockroom and ducked into the back, heart hammering. Of course the syrup wasn't there. It was already buried under coffee grounds and croissants in the dumpster. I grabbed a random herbal tea box to buy time, but when I came back out, Martin was glaring daggers. "We can't run out of chai. Not tonight." He snapped his fingers at Kyle. "Go restock it." Kyle wiped flour from his hands and gave me the quickest glance, half warning, half encouragement, before heading to the fridge. A few minutes later, he came back empty-handed, shrugging. "Must have been a miscount," he said smoothly. Martin's jaw tightened. Unacceptable. The crowd hadn't noticed yet, but the rhythm of the cafe was wobbling. Drinks were slower. Orders got swapped. A couple of families muttered impatiently as they waited. And every time Martin turned to lecture us, I made another trip to the dumpster. By 10 o'clock, the sabotage wasn't just invisible, it was bleeding into the show. The pastry case was emptier than it should have been, but not because of sales. Customers started asking, "No more croissants? No muffins left?" Martin laughed it off, clapping one man on the shoulder. "Fresh stock tomorrow, my friend. We don't hold on to stale junk here." Stale junk. The words burned in my ears. When the man walked away, Martin turned, his smile dropping like a mask. He marched toward me, his voice low but sharp. "Why is the case empty, Liam? We baked double for tonight." I kept my face neutral. People bought more than usual. His eyes narrowed. He didn't believe me, but the crowd distracted him before he could press. Another customer waved, and Martin instantly put the mask back on. "Excuse me," he said through gritted teeth, then turned back to his audience. The tension only made me bolder. I slipped into the fridge again, yanking out cartons of milk, boxes of sandwiches, tubs of cream cheese. My arms shook from the weight as I dragged them outside, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Kyle met me at the door, grabbing one of the boxes without a word. Together, we dumped them into the bin. By 10:30, the dumpster was half full of everything Martin prized. And still, he had no clue. But then it happened. A little girl, no older than 7, tugged on her mom's sleeve at the counter. "Mommy, can we get a brownie?" The mom smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, honey, they said they're out." The girl frowned. "But there are brownies in the trash." The cafe went still. Every head turned. Through the glass front, the alley dumpster was just visible in the glow of the street lamp. And right there, poking out of the open lid, was the corner of a brownie tray. Frosted, perfect, unmistakable. Martin froze mid-laugh, his hand still in the air from a toast. For the first time all night, his face drained of color. "Excuse me," he muttered. The mom looked confused. She saw someone throwing food out back. Dozens of eyes shifted from her to Martin, to me. And in that moment, I realized the real show was just beginning. The cafe buzz, that cozy hum of voices and clinking mugs, collapsed into silence. For once, Martin didn't have a line ready. His jaw clenched, eyes darting between the crowd and me, like he was calculating whether to laugh it off or strangle me right there. "Out of context," he finally said, forcing a chuckle. "Kids say the funniest things, don't they?" But no one laughed. The little girl's wide eyes were too earnest, too sharp. Customers craned their necks toward the window, some standing to see better. A couple of phones even lifted, recording. I could feel my pulse in my throat. This was it. Martin's kingdom of fresh-only perfection was cracking, and all I had to do was push. A man near the counter cleared his throat. "Wait, are you really throwing away brownies? Perfectly good food." Martin straightened, his salesman smile snapping back on. "Of course not. It's about standards. We don't serve old pastries. That's why people come here, quality." "But they look fine," another voice piped up. A woman with a stroller, frowning. "You'd rather dump food than sell it cheaper? Or donate it?" The room stirred, voices overlapping now. "Seems wasteful. My mom used to run a shelter, they'd kill for that food." "Didn't you brag about being community-focused?" Martin raised both hands, palms out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, this is a business, not a food bank. You pay for quality here, and that's what you get." It was the wrong thing to say. A ripple of disapproval moved through the crowd, mutters growing sharper. Someone whispered the word greedy, and it stuck like gum on the floor. And then, as if fate wanted to drive the nail deeper, Kyle stepped forward. He wiped his flour-streaked hands on his apron and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's telling the truth about one thing, we do throw it out. Every night. Trays of muffins, bagels, whole loaves of bread. Into the trash. While folks outside go hungry." Gasps. A couple people swiveled toward me, waiting for confirmation. My chest tightened, but then I realized I didn't need to protect Martin anymore. "He orders it," I said simply. My voice was steady, calm. Every crumb. Phones shot higher into the air. The whole cafe was recording now. Martin's face darkened, veins pulsing at his temple. He stepped toward me, voice low and venomous. "Careful, Liam." But the genie was out of the bottle. A man near the door called, "So you'd rather trash food than feed people?" A young woman snapped, "No wonder your prices are insane." The crowd wasn't asking anymore, they were accusing. Martin's carefully built image was unraveling in real time. He tried to recover, pasting on his smile again, but it looked brittle, cracked. Misunderstandings happen. Let's all enjoy the music, shall we? But no one picked up their mugs. No one clapped. All eyes stayed locked on him, and on me. And for the first time since I'd been hired, Martin wasn't the one in control. Martin's smile finally cracked. His jaw twitched, his eyes flicking to the cameras pointed his way. He hated losing control more than anything, and tonight, control was slipping through his fingers like sand. You don't understand, he snapped, his voice louder now. This is how real businesses work. You don't get to keep customers by selling leftovers. But you do by throwing them away. A man shot back. That did it. The room wasn't curious anymore. It was hostile. Muttered disgust, rolled eyes, even a couple of people standing to leave. The band in the corner strummed nervously, waiting for a cue, but no one was listening. Martin turned on me like a wolf. His voice dropped low, but the fury in it vibrated through my bones. What did you do, Liam? The question wasn't about the pastries anymore. He knew. His instincts were too sharp not to. I met his stare, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I did exactly what you told me. Confusion flickered in the crowd. Murmurs rippled. Martin's face went red, then pale. You, he hissed, but he didn't finish. He stormed toward the back, pushing past Kyle, nearly knocking a customer's coffee onto the floor. The crowd shuffled, some following, some whispering, phones still recording. I stayed at the counter, my hands trembling but steady enough to stack mugs like nothing was wrong. My heart pounded as I heard the slam of the walk-in fridge door. Then another, louder, when he flung it open. And then, the roar. Where is everything? It shook the café. People froze mid-sentence. Even the guitarist's fingers stilled on the strings. Martin burst back into the café, his face wild, sweat beading at his hairline. Who touched my stockroom? Kyle folded his arms. We followed orders. Martin spun on him. You shut your mouth. But then a woman by the window pointed outside. Look. Dozens of heads turned. Out in the alley, the dumpster overflowed, its lid hanging open, towers of bread loaves, cartons of milk, pastries, sandwiches spilling out like a grotesque feast for rats. The street light made it shine like a stage. Gasps swept the café. Phones zoomed in, recording every detail. Martin froze, chest heaving. He looked at the dumpster, then back at me. You, he growled. You did this. And I smiled, small, calm, almost polite. You told me to throw it all away. The silence after that was deafening. Then someone laughed. A single sharp bark of disbelief that set off murmurs, then outright chuckles. Not at me, at him. At Martin, the visionary owner, caught choking on his own arrogance. The laugh spread, rolling through the café until it wasn't a crowd anymore but a mob, mocking, sneering. Someone clapped sarcastically. Another muttered, "Guess we know what community values means here." Martin's face twisted, rage and humiliation blending into something almost feral. He slammed his hand against the counter, rattling mugs. "Get out," he snarled. "All of you." But no one moved. The balance of power had shifted, and Martin didn't realize yet that he was the one who'd been thrown away. Martin's voice boomed across the café, desperate, furious. I said get out. But instead of obeying, people reached for their phones again. Customers weren't customers anymore. They were witnesses. Documentarians. His meltdown was being live-streamed, framed perfectly with the overflowing dumpster glowing in the background like a monument to his arrogance. You'd rather waste food than feed people, one man shouted. Shame on you, a woman snapped. This is disgusting, someone muttered near the door. Every voice chipped away at Martin's carefully polished image. He pointed at me, spittle flying. This is his fault. He sabotaged me, do you hear? This idiot. Your employee did what you told him, Kyle cut in, stepping between us. His tone was calm, steady, but his words hit like a hammer. You said throw it all away. And he did. The crowd murmured in agreement. Martin's face twisted. He looked like a man trying to plug a dozen holes in a sinking ship with his bare hands. You think you know how to run a business? You think this place runs on charity? No, I said, loud enough to cut through the noise. But it doesn't have to run on cruelty either. That landed. The cafe went silent for a beat, every eye locked on me. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. For once, Martin's authority didn't scare me. Then, as if on cue, a teenager near the window shouted, I'm not paying for this garbage cafe, and stormed out. Others followed, some quietly, some slamming cups down in disgust. One family deliberately left their half-finished drinks on the table, muttering, never coming back here. The trickle turned into a flood. Within minutes, half the cafe emptied. The band packed up their guitars without even saying goodbye. People streamed out into the night, a trail of mutters and side eyes and glowing phone screens recording Martin's humiliation from every angle. Martin stood frozen in the center of it all, pale under the warm cafe lights, watching his community night collapse into ashes. You think this is funny, Liam? He hissed at me once the crowd thinned. His voice shook with rage, but there was something else beneath it too. Fear. I tilted my head, calm as I'd ever been. No. But it's fair. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. His fists clenched, his shoulders trembled. But then another sound broke the silence, an alert pinging from his phone. Then, another. And another. He glanced down. His face went white. Martin staggered back like the air had been punched out of him. And I knew, deep down, that whatever came next, his cafe would never recover. By the next morning, the cafe wasn't just empty of customers, it was radioactive. I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. Notifications, tags, messages. Someone had uploaded the videos from community night, and they were spreading like wildfire. Headlines on local feeds read things like, Cafe owner dumps food while families starve, and, caught on camera, waste over compassion. Clips of Martin's meltdown circulated everywhere, his shouting face frozen in unflattering screenshots, his words, this is a business, not a food bank, replayed again and again, mocked in the comments. Even national accounts picked it up, slapping captions like late-stage capitalism in action. When I walked to my shift, I expected to see at least a few regulars waiting for their morning fix. Instead, the cafe windows were plastered with signs, shame on waste, donate, don't dump, never again here. And the worst part, people weren't just boycotting, they were protesting. A small crowd had gathered, holding signs, chanting softly. I recognized one of them, the man who had asked about discounted pastries weeks ago. His voice carried now feed people, not landfills. Martin was inside, pacing like a caged animal. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. When he saw me, his eyes went bloodshot with fury. You, he snarled. You did this. You ruined me. I stepped behind the counter, calm as ever. No, Martin. You did this to yourself. All I did was listen. He slammed a fist on the counter. Do you have any idea how much stock you wasted? Thousands of dollars. Gone. Not wasted. I said, my voice steady. Exposed. Kyle appeared from the back, arms crossed. They needed to see it, Martin. The customers, the community. All of them. You've been doing this for years. Martin's face twisted. You think you're heroes? You're both fired. Fired. You'll never work in food service again. But even as he said it, the weight of his words was crumbling. Outside, cameras clicked. Journalists had arrived, smelling blood in the water. One reporter pressed against the glass, snapping a photo of Martin's furious face framed against his empty café. Another filmed a segment right there on the sidewalk. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter whether he fired me or not. Because Martin's café was already finished. The real question was how far he'd fall before he finally admitted defeat. The café didn't survive a week. By Wednesday, suppliers had pulled their contracts. No one wanted their brand tied to Martin's name after the videos. By Friday, the health inspector showed up, apparently tipped off by a dozen anonymous complaints, and slapped a bright orange notice on the door. Closed pending investigation. I stood across the street watching as Martin tried to argue with the inspector, his face red, his gestures frantic. But there was no audience left to impress. The regulars who once filled the café now walked by with cold stares or phones held high, documenting his downfall. The protests outside had turned into food drives. Local churches and shelters set up tables with donated bread and sandwiches, things Martin used to throw away without a second thought. People lined up, smiling, eating. It was as if the community had decided to replace what he'd destroyed. The irony was almost poetic. I didn't bother showing up for my last shift. Kyle called me the night before and said, "Don't worry about quitting, place will be dead before you hand in your apron." He was right. Martin texted me once, a message that was half threat, half plea. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You'll regret it. I didn't answer. Because I didn't regret it. Not one bit. 4 months, I'd been the good employee, the obedient one, the one who followed orders even when they felt wrong. And all it got me was guilt I carried home every night. But the moment I finally did what Martin asked, literally, everything changed. The truth was, Martin destroyed himself. His arrogance, his greed, his obsession with control. All I did was shine a light on it. And as I walked past the shuttered café one last time, the closed sign flapping against the glass, I felt lighter. Sometimes, obeying is the most rebellious thing you can do.